Have you ever looked at a broken part of your life and thought, there's no way this can ever be restored? Maybe it's a relationship that fell apart. Maybe it's a dream that slowly faded. Maybe it's not something people can see at all, just the quiet exhaustion in your heart, the kind you carry alone. There are moments in life when everything feels ruined, moments when you want to look away, pretend you're fine, and keep going as if nothing happened. But Nehemiah did not do that. When he heard that Jerusalem's walls were broken down and its gates had been burned with fire, he did not ignore it. He did not run from it. He did not numb himself to it. He wept. He fasted. And he prayed. That is where this story begins. Not with strength, not with a plan, but with tears before God. And maybe that's exactly where restoration begins for us too. Because the truth is, not all brokenness is visible. Some walls fall in public. Others fall quietly inside us. You can still smile and be deeply tired. You can still show up for everyone else while something in you is falling apart. You can still say, I'm okay, even when you know you're not. And sometimes the hardest part is not the pain itself. Sometimes the hardest part is admitting that something is broken. But Nehemiah shows us that faith does not begin with pretending to be strong. Faith begins with honesty. It begins when we bring the real condition of our hearts before God and stop acting like we can carry it all on our own. When Nehemiah heard the news, his heart broke for his people, for his city, for what had been lost. His tears were not weakness. They were love. They were burden. They were prayer. And that matters, because real faith is not denying reality. Real faith is looking straight at what is broken and still believing that God is not finished. That's what makes Nehemiah's story so powerful. He did not just feel sad about the ruins. He let that burden move him into prayer. And then, in time, prayer moved him into action. I think that's the question this story puts in front of all of us. When we see what is broken, what do we do with it? Do we just grieve it? Do we complain about it? Do we avoid it? Or do we bring it before God and ask, what are you calling me to do here? Because all of us, at some point, stand in front of ruins. Sometimes it's a family situation that feels too damaged to fix. Sometimes it's a friendship that ended in silence. Sometimes it's disappointment, burnout, betrayal, or fear. And for so many women, especially, there is a kind of quiet strength that the world praises but rarely understands. The strength of holding everything together, the strength of showing up, the strength of carrying responsibility, expectation, and emotional weight without falling apart in public. But even strong people get tired. Even faithful people get overwhelmed. Even people who love God can find themselves standing in front of something broken, wondering what to do next. And this is why Nehemiah matters. Because he reminds us that God works through people who care deeply, pray honestly, and move courageously. Nehemiah was not living in the ruins. He was serving in the king's palace as cupbearer. He had a position. He had stability. He could have stayed where it was safe. He could have heard the news, felt sad for a moment, and then gone back to his normal life. But he didn't. He allowed the pain of his people to interrupt his comfort. He allowed the condition of Jerusalem to become personal. And when God put that burden on his heart, he didn't push it away. That's important, because sometimes the very thing that keeps stirring in your heart, the thing you can't ignore, the thing that keeps bringing you back to prayer, may not be random at all. It may be the beginning of a calling. For Nehemiah, prayer came first. Before the rebuilding, before the strategy, before the risk, before the conversation with the king, he prayed. And when the moment came, he was ready to move. That move took courage. Going before the king with sadness on his face was dangerous. Asking for permission to go rebuild a broken city was risky. Stepping into a long, difficult assignment with opposition ahead was not easy. But Nehemiah chose obedience over comfort. He chose calling over fear. And that is where the story begins to shift. Because in every meaningful journey, there comes a moment when we have to decide, will we stay where it feels safe, or will we say yes to what God is asking of us? Nehemiah said yes. He left the familiar. He entered the ruins. He surveyed the damage. He faced the reality of what had been broken. And then he began the work. But let's be honest, the rebuilding was not smooth. There was resistance. There was mockery. There were threats. There were people on the outside trying to stop the work, and fear on the inside trying to slow it down. There was pressure, distraction, and fatigue. And still, Nehemiah did not stop. That part matters too. Because sometimes we imagine that if God is in something, it should be easy. We think open doors mean no resistance. We think calling means clarity every day. We think obedience should feel comfortable once we begin. But Nehemiah's story says otherwise. Sometimes you can be exactly where God called you to be and still face opposition. Sometimes you can be doing holy work and still feel tired. Sometimes rebuilding requires faith, not just to start, but to continue. And Nehemiah continued. He led with vision. He kept praying. He stayed alert. He refused distraction. And the people rebuilt with a tool in one hand and a weapon in the other. It was a picture of dependence and determination, prayer and action, faith and perseverance. That's what I love about this story. It is deeply spiritual, but it is not passive. Nehemiah prayed like everything depended on God, and he worked like obedience required his full participation. That is such an important reminder for us. Prayer is not doing nothing. Prayer is where strength is formed. Prayer is where motives are purified. Prayer is where courage grows. And when the time comes, prayer gives us the strength to move. Maybe that's where you are today. Maybe you are standing in front of something broken, and you don't know how it will ever be repaired. Maybe you've cried over it. Maybe you've hidden it. Maybe you've tried to be strong for so long that you don't even know how to admit how tired you are. If that's you, hear this clearly. Your tears are not a sign that you have failed. Your weakness is not proof that God has left you. Your broken place is not the end of the story. What if the ruins in front of you are not just evidence of loss? What if they are also the place where God wants to begin rebuilding? What if the pain you've been carrying is not meaningless? What if, in God's hands, it becomes the place where compassion deepens, faith strengthens, and purpose becomes clear? Nehemiah teaches us that restoration begins when we stop pretending and start praying. It grows when we listen for God's direction. And it moves forward when we take the next faithful step. Not the whole plan, not every answer, just the next step. That may be what some of us need to hear most. You do not have to rebuild everything in one day. You do not have to have all the strength at once. You do not have to know every outcome before you obey. You just need the courage to bring what is broken to God, and the willingness to say, "If you lead me, I will go." Even now, God is still restoring lives through people who pray. He is still healing hearts. He is still rebuilding what looked ruined. He is still using ordinary people with tender hearts and trembling faith. Not just the confident, not just the polished, not just the people who seem to have it all together, but the honest, the available, the surrendered. And maybe that is why this story still speaks so powerfully today. Because the world is still full of broken walls, broken hearts, broken trust, broken communities. And God is still looking for people who will not turn away. People who will weep, people who will pray, people who will rise, people who will rebuild. So if you are in a season of ruins, do not lose heart. If something in your life feels broken beyond repair, do not assume God is finished. If all you have right now are tears and a prayer, that is more powerful than you think. This is not the end. This may be the beginning of honesty, the beginning of surrender, the beginning of courage, the beginning of restoration. So lift your eyes again. Bring your brokenness to God again. Pray again. Trust again. Take the next step again. Because the God who met Nehemiah in his burden is the same God who meets us in ours, and he still rebuilds. He still restores. He still works through those who pray. So don't give up. God is not finished with your story yet.